Welcome to the Vale, where the paranormal is our playground. And we are back with another installment of Albert Fish.
Part 3.
As if I wasn't traumatized enough,
I don't think you were.
we're gonna go the third round. So somehow, kind of like in a UFC fight, I made it to the third round. I think Leah won both rounds, though.
I have. Okay.
Um,
So
this is another special Creeps and Cocktails, and
yes. And this is our gin for our Ricky. If you remember, Ricky was with gin, club soda, and lime juice.
Mhm.
So I've already got the club soda and lime juice all put together. So we're just going to add the gin.
Okay.
And it's Friday night, so I'm going to do a little extra.
Okay. Friday night's good for fighting.
You want to fight? And
well, you just handed me the bottle, so that might have been your.
And I did something different this time. Look what I brought. Stir 6.
Oh my gosh.
So then
in our coffee mugs.
So then I'm not like spilling it everywhere. So we forgot to bring the glasses this time because we took the glasses home to clean and then forgot to bring them back. So we're using coffee mugs. Coffee mugs for our liqueur.
Which does not matter. That's fine. That is a fair.
Cheers to episode 3. The conclusion.
And the start of a new season.
Yes, because right after this, season 3 starts. This might be long again. I'm going to try not to go as long as last time, but we had a lot to talk about last time to get to where we are now. So if you missed episode 2 of Albert Fish, we talked about his murders from after part 1.
Mm-hmm.
So part 1, we discussed his life, we discussed his childhood, we discussed the orphanage, discussed the horrors of St. John's. Then we moved on and talked about his first murder victim that we know of. Mm-hmm. Again, it may not have been his first.
Right.
But that was Francis McDonnell. We finished episode 1 with that. Episode 2, we went into his next couple murders, which was Billy Gaffney and Grace Budd.
Mm-hmm.
Then we talked about the difficultness of his arrest, the 6 years after Grace Budd murder, how he kind of escaped and eluded police, and how the wrong people kept being brought in for being suspects, and how her mom kept saying, yeah, that was it. Yeah, that was the one. Yeah, that was the one. And then how hard Detective King worked and the amount of effort he put in to finally get Albert Fish, who was Frank Howard, but really Albert Fish.
Right.
And in the end, he's still not Albert Fish because his name is actually Hamilton. Remember that? He was born as Hamilton. So we talked a lot about, kind of pick up where we left off. Last time we were talking about Albert being interrogated for the death of Francis McDonnell, and how Beatrice, the little girl that he tried to lure into the woods to help find rhubarb, how she came and saw him and identified him, even though he worked really hard to hide his face and like kept covering his face in his hands, or would squat in his cot and put his face down in the cot, just so he wouldn't be recognized. And she ended up getting a peek at him and goes, yep, that's the one, which then puts him in the area of the Francis McDonnell murder. So at least the police were able to tie him to the area at the same time of the murder. So we ended there, and that happened not long after he was arrested. Okay, so here we are. He's been arrested. He's indicted for murder in the first degree, which has at that time a mandatory sentence of death in the state that he was in.
Right.
So episode 3. So before trial, Albert's attorney, who was James Dempsey, wasn't his original attorney, but is the attorney that Albert went for. And he was quite a known attorney by the residents in the jail. I'm guessing strings are pulled from his family, his kids and stuff, that he was able to get to James Dempsey.
Hmm.
But James wanted Albert to be evaluated by another psychiatrist, not from the prosecution, because the prosecution already had him evaluated by 2 different doctors. So defense wanted their own psych
Right.
eval, which makes sense. It's not unusual. So he was evaluated again by a Dr. Frederick Wortham.
Okay.
Wortham.
Yeah. It looks like-
Wortham.
Yeah.
There we go. If you think I'm sounding funny today, it's because prior to coming here, I did have a little drink at dinner, and it was quite strong. But I'm good now.
Are you sure?
I'm not sure.
This might get entertaining as it goes.
All right. So Dr. Wortham was highly educated. But I also want to put in the disclaimer that this doctor also went on to publish books about the theory of how comic books were the cause of violent people, how they would cause murders.
Okay.
We now know that this theory is disproven.
Right.
That's a theory that a lot of people say, even to this day. Violent video games, violent things that you see on TV can cause murders and serial killers and stuff. Not true, but this was the doctor that kind of started that and had his life pretty much dedicated to proving the theory that comic books were the start of murderous minds. So he was the director of psychiatric clinic for the Court of General Sessions, and he was actually the senior psychiatrist at Bellevue Hospital for 2 years.
Oh.
And studying Albert and speaking to family, he dug into his childhood. He was doing comparisons to other criminals. The doctor learned that there was absolutely nothing comparable to Albert. So we'll start off with something that he said, which I thought was very interesting. I'm going to get to the right page here. And again, we're talking from the book Deranged, which was a very good book.
Which I don't think I have that image up in the thing anymore, so which is fine. You just have to go back to the first episode to see it.
See, Deranged.
Just to give it a reference.
Yes. Very good book. Obviously, I cannot go into all the details that this author did, or else this podcast would go for like months.
Yeah.
So, I mean, honestly, if you want to get more details into the case of Albert Fish, please read this book. It's amazing. So, reading from here, in the end, Wortham was forced to conclude that there were no comparable cases. Fish's life has been one of unparalleled perversity. There was no known perversion that he did not practice and practice frequently. Wortham determined that all these depravities have been fueled by a single monstrous need, an unappeasable lust for pain. In quotes, he says, I always had a desire to, I shouldn't say he said, Albert said, in quotes, I always had a desire to inflict pain on others and have others inflict pain on me. I always seem to enjoy everything that hurts. The desire to inflict pain, that is all that is the uppermost. So, a little scary.
Yeah, not
right.
Yeah, not normal.
No, I don't think I like pain.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of it.
And I have no desire to like inflict pain on others unless they piss me off. So.
Why do you look over at me?
I did not.
Okay.
All right. So, and just to recap what happened to Grace very quickly, we read the letter that was written from Albert, and we read that last time, right?
Yes. Yeah, we did.
I mean, and not to go through the whole letter again.
It was a little traumatizing.
Was it?
Nah, not too bad.
I was gonna say, are you sure? No, it was sad. I was kind of gonna go back to the letter. I'm not sure I can find it again right now. Yeah. But in that letter, he discussed to Miss Budd, which still irritates me how he addressed Miss Budd. To my dearest Miss Budd. Like, get the hell out of here, dude. You just like took her daughter and killed her, and you're gonna write her a letter 6 years later and go like, my dearest Miss Budd. Like, fuck all the way off. Anyways, he discussed how he took Grace. He discussed the strawberries and pot cheese that he brought, which was kind of the start of his undoing, by putting in that detail. That was not a known detail. And because he put that detail in there, right away, Detective King got on it and was like, this is the guy. We know this is him now. So that letter was the ultimate demise.
Yeah, that's was all the evidence they needed, really.
Right. And he discussed how he killed Grace by putting a knee on her chest and then choking her, so suffocating and choking her.
Okay.
He talked about how he slit her throat and drained the blood, decapitated her, and then took the blood and like dumped out the blood out of the window. Then he talked about how he cut her in half, and he even put in there how he ate her.
Yeah.
And then what he did with her body. So that was the letter that he sent to poor Mrs. Budd, who had to roughly hear about what happened to her child.
No.
So, again, the doctor said that there was absolutely nothing comparable to Albert.
No.
They just had nothing to compare to the kind of depravities that Mr. Albert was doing. So while in jail, Albert continued odd behaviors and ended up getting a guard to pass him a match under the guise of wanting to light a cigarette.
Okay.
Which was common in these days. Inmates were allowed to smoke inside.
Okay.
So this was a common thing. Albert wanted to smoke. They would always light a cigarette for him. He was able to coerce this officer into just giving him the match, and he would light it himself.
Okay.
Eventually, the guard started getting suspicious and checked Albert's cell and found that he also had cotton and alcohol. As you remember from, I think, even episode 1, I talked about how he would put alcohol on like towels and on a rod and like put it up himself and then light it on fire. So he wanted to do this again in the jail cell. So they found the cotton and they found lighter fluid or alcohol, and he was going to light his butt on fire again. Self-mutilation, whatever. Like, that's your thing, dude. All right.
Yeah, I mean,
he was also found to take chicken bone from his dinners. They would have chicken, and he would take chicken bone and sharpen it and then use it to cut himself.
Okay.
But here's the thing. This kind of pain was gratifying to him. It's what he wanted. It was like sexually pleasing to him. It made him feel good. So being in jail and being deprived of that was really depriving him of like his desires.
Yeah.
So good on that. Sucky that he was able to still kind of harm himself in some ways, but he had to sit with his desire, I guess. It was reported that that this was something that he actually did to children that he tortured and would gag them. However, as he reported this, he preferred to not use a gag so he can hear their screams as it gave him pleasure. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely terrifying. Albert was stated to, like, he acted like he was excited to be put to death by the electric chair. He was stated that it was going to be like the most absolute thrill of his life.
Probably was.
Well, but he also...
On some level.
But he was also I'm going to put it out there just like this. He was peeing his pants over it.
Mm.
He was trying very hard to plant the seed that he was insane in some ways. Like he would even say to reporters, like when they said, "Why would you do this?" It's like, I don't know, I guess I'm insane. He was trying to like plant this seed that if he got the insanity deal, then he wouldn't be put to death. He
Okay.
honestly did not want to be put to death. He often was asking to get a lesser charge, like murder in the second degree.
Okay.
Was hoping to get insanity, or even try to come up with a negotiation or deal with the prosecution by saying he will offer to donate his body to science in in exchange for life in prison versus death.
Okay.
And he had said that he felt that humanity would benefit more by a study of my brain and body than sending me to the electric chair. Which, let's think about this for a second.
Okay.
Is he wrong?
I don't know.
I mean, he had the longest list of mental defects, especially when it came to his sexualization,
Mm-hmm.
that anybody's ever had.
Right. But
Wouldn't have made sense to try to study his brain, especially in the early years of psychology, really learning what could be going on in the brain. And
I mean,
granted, they didn't have the MRI stuff that we have now,
right.
but I think more studies should have been done on him while he was alive, but there's only so much that you could have done at that time.
Right.
Alcohol break. Okay. Okay. So trial began March 11th of 1935. During the trial, the entire Budd family were called to the stand, and each one of them identified Albert as Frank Howard. Mr. Budd even got up from his stand, walked to Albert, and pointed at him, saying, "That's the man who took my child."
Okay.
Shortly after, he began to cry, and the court was paused so he can compose himself. Albert's children were all called to the stand, and Albert Jr. testified to the fact that he noticed in the later years that he lived with his dad, he noticed his face would get red, like being out in the sun, and his eyes would look different as if he was frightened on the nights of a full moon. He would also want to eat raw meat on these nights. And the night that Grace Budd was killed was a full moon night.
Okay.
So, as crazy as that sounds, I'm like, are we really going with the werewolf story right now? Are we really going to go there?
Yeah. Obviously he is.
Well, he did end up getting the nickname from media of Werewolf of Wisteria.
Okay.
So that's where the Werewolf of Wisteria came from.
Okay.
He was also called like Vampire of Wisteria or something of that nature. He was given a lot of cool names, which I think we really need to stop doing. Can we please stop giving killers cool names?
I agree. Totally agree.
I would love to be called Werewolf of Wisteria, but I'm not going to eat a kid to get that. Sorry. It's not going to happen. But it did bother me to know that Junior went up there and was like, his face would get red, his eyes would look fearful and dirty, and he would want to eat raw meat on full moon nights. Like, are we going there?
I mean,
are we gonna add some comic book stories into this? Like,
you could.
All right.
You could.
All of his children testified that Albert was a good father and a good grandfather, never harming them or abusive in words.
Okay.
When asked about his reaction to animals, the children would say that if they were too rough on the family pets, he would say, "Don't do that. You'll hurt the poor little dog." While the children never said anything bad about their father, they did admit to his oddness and behaviors and concerns that they had. And due to the behaviors, they did not ever say that Albert was innocent of charges. They were just sad and accepted the charges.
Okay.
They were witnessed sitting behind Albert in court, crying and covering their eyes, especially his favorite, Gertrude. So besides Albert Jr., who was talking to the reporters, and we talked about this in the last episode, he had called his dad like an old skunk, or, I was afraid something like this would happen.
Yeah.
Because he did that, Albert actually like ended his relationship with Albert Jr. and had even,
well, I mean,
and he like wrote to his favorite Gertrude,
yeah,
telling her that if there's nothing else that she could ever do for him, she could just do one last thing, and that is to never speak to A again. He couldn't even say the name in the letters. It was like, ever speak to A again, and don't allow your children to have anything to do with him.
Okay.
So he was very angry that one of his kids would say something like that and not like have his back and defend him.
I guess. I mean,
but dude, you killed children.
Yeah.
And what did you want your kids to say?
I mean,
like, yeah, that's cool. That's still my dad.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, yeah.
Yes, your kids are going to be.
There's two sides to it, I guess. It's still.
Right.
I mean, that's.
I'm kind of like in the mindset of fuck off, dude.
Yeah, but
you killed this 10-year-old child while having your grandkid on your lap anytime you came over to visit.
Yeah.
And acted like nothing happened. And we're like this sweet old grandfather to my kids, and was like the sweet dad to us. And yet here's this other life you're living.
Yeah. Yeah. Multiple lives, but.
So it was very. I'm sure it was very hard for the family.
Yes.
To see their dad in that light, knowing at the same time that their dad did some weird shit.
Yeah.
Like they witnessed weird shit from their dad. So I don't think there was a surprise there. There was a sadness.
No, I think more of a realization.
Yeah. Well, the stepdaughter took the stand. So if you remember in the last episode, I talked about how Albert ended up getting married 3 different times in 1 year.
Jeez.
And they were never legal marriages because he actually never divorced his first wife who left him.
What possesses a man to do that? Like,
he was after money. He was after what he can gain from these.
Like, women are challenging already.
Damn.
And who wants 3 wives in 1 year?
He didn't have 3 all at the same time.
Oh, okay.
He would leave one and go find another, and then do whatever with that one, and then leave that one and go find another.
You gotta marry him, though.
You good? You good?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh. Just saying. I mean, and in the end, they weren't even real marriages anyway. They
Correct.
weren't legal, so he technically didn't marry 3 different women.
But he wanted their money.
Right, but he technically didn't legally marry anybody else.
They didn't know that.
Right.
So the stepdaughter took the stand. Mary, who was the daughter of one of Albert marriages to Marta Nichols, explained that the games that Albert would play with her and her siblings. Now, Mary at this time was about 18, 19.
Okay.
She was one of the people that he actually sent a letter to from jail. And it was a creepy letter.
Okay.
He like called her Kitty.
Oh.
Like Kiddy, Kitty.
Okay.
And was saying like, it's your birthday today. You know what I would do if I was there? I would give you 18 spankings on your bare behind.
Okay.
Talked about her going to the Y Club and swimming, and to be careful because there's a lot of boys there that like looking at girls. And that things could happen. And then he ended it with like, please keep writing to me. If not, I know where to find you for your spankings. So that's how he would talk to his 18-year-old stepchild.
Okay.
Which is nothing like the letters that he was sending to like Gertrude or any of his kids or even his grandchild, which was like these fatherly, grandfatherly type conversations that he was having. So the stepchild, to me, meant less to him than his own family.
Okay.
because he never spoke like that to his kids or his grandchildren.
Right.
And his daughter Gertrude's, Her's daughter, absolutely loved her grandfather, and like would send him letters saying how she loved and missed him and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So again, the family saw him as this older gentleman who had some odd erotic behaviors that they really couldn't explain, but was still this kind, sweet man who took care of them, who was a mother and a father to them because their mother left,
Right.
and who absolutely adored his grandchildren.
But I will say he did step up in that aspect, but
I'm
he's
glad you found a positive in that.
But he was still pretty messed up.
That
Just
deserved
saying.
a bigger drink. Okay.
Just saying.
So the stepdaughter got up and talked about games that he would play with her and the siblings, so other stepchildren. So one of them was called Buck Buck, How Many Hands Up? Have any idea what kind of game this was?
No.
You want to guess?
Not really.
Okay.
No.
Okay, so Buck Buck, How Many Hands Up? He would go into his room and put on like these tiny brown trunks. Ew. Anyway.
Sounds creepy already.
Yes. Tiny brown trunks on this skinny old shriveled man to hang out with his stepkids, who was like, at this time, she probably was pre-teen to early teen.
Okay.
And then her siblings younger. So what he would do is he'd come out in his trunks and trunks only and no shirt or anything else. He would get on all fours and he had each kid sit on his back with their back kind of facing away from him. So like his head is here, his butt is here. The kids would be sitting on his back and facing that direction.
Okay.
So then he couldn't see them. They were on his back and turned away. So then they would have to raise their fingers. And he would have to guess how many fingers they're holding up.
Okay.
If he got it wrong, then they would have to whack him with a paint stick that he would use to like stir the paint. And of course, he always got it wrong. And he would even make up like numbers that weren't even as many as your hand can hold. So he'd be like, one hand up, and they'd have like 2, and he'd say 7. And then they would have to whack him 7 times because he got it wrong.
Alrighty then.
Kids, of course, thought that this was funny. Like, haha, I get to like hit dad. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So they're not seeing the problem with this. However, he was getting a full sexual gratification out of this by having these kids all in all whip him.
It's kind of creepy.
Yeah. They also played another game called Sack of Potatoes Over. So same brown thin trunks, nothing on. He would then pick up the kids, throw them over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes, and then drop them behind him while they would go down his back, scratching his back. And he would want them to scratch as hard as they could. So by the time the game was done, his whole back was like beet red because he was just letting the kids just scratch his back as they were dropped down. So that's Sack of Potatoes Over.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's...
Then he would bring these sewing pins, like the pins that I was talking about, how he was putting them up him. He would bring these pins to the kids.
So we're going to go back to that now. Okay.
He'd bring the kids over to the kids, and he would put the pins underneath his nails. And he would try to play this game with them, like, how many pins can you put underneath the nails? Well, the kids were like, this really hurts. I don't want to do this. And he goes, okay, well, that means that I'll have to put more pins in. And he would like put so many pins underneath his nails that his hands would become bloody. That was a game. Yeah.
Okay.
And even after all these games, their mom still married him. It may have lasted 2 weeks, but she did. Yep.
How'd she find out it wasn't legal?
Eventually that had to come out because he was still married.
Just thought.
So when Dr. Wortham took the stand, he explained the amount of disturbance that Albert had in his brain. He went into Albert's family history, including the family members afflicted with mental illness and the experience he had in the orphanage. Then he talks about the abuse that started the sexual disturbance that Albert faced. So we're going to read one of his passages from the doctor.
Okay.
All right. Dr. Wortham says, now the experience in the orphanage is very important. Because he dates his earliest sexual abnormalities to this time, he described to me very vividly that in the place that not only did the inmates commit all sorts of sensory acts with each other, in which he joined, but it made the biggest and greatest impression on him. One of the guardians there, a sister or teacher, had a habit of frequently whipping the boys and taking 6 at a time and having them strip and having one see what happened to the others. He remembered very vividly seeing the other boys whipped and recalled before the age of 7, he had his first sexual feeling.
Okay.
Dempsey asked, and what did he get that feeling from? And it was from being whipped himself and from seeing other boys whipped and screaming. From a young child on, Fish displayed a number of early neurotic traits. Bedwetting was one of them. He was high-strung and inordinately a sensitive child. Talked about how he hated being called ham and eggs, and he couldn't stand it to the point that he adopted the new name Albert.
Okay.
Okay. Every sexual abnormality that I've ever heard of this man has practiced. Not only has he thought about it, not only has he daydreamed about it, but he practiced it.
Okay.
He said Wortham said that Fish was a sadist of incredible cruelty. All of his mind was bent on eliciting responses of pain in someone else. In addition, he was a homosexual. All through his life, women were just a substitute, an entirely secondary choice and secondary pleasure. He also talked about his outstanding abnormality, what was known technically as pedophilia, his prime sexual interest.
Pedophilia or
pedophilia, sorry, thank you.
Okay. I didn't know if you meant like the
No.
bread. Pita bread.
Hey man, drinking. Okay, so his prime sexual interest has only been of children from the age of 5 to 14 or 16.
Okay, so actually 5 to 16, not or 14.
14 or 16, according to the book. I'm speaking directly from the
he
book.
Didn't like 15.
Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe 15 was off limits.
Okay, I'm just making a point.
He also said he started his sexual career, so to say, at the age of 17 at the time he became a painter. Now, that profession of a painter, this man has used as a convenience. He worked in many different institutions. He worked at the YMCAs. He worked in different homes.
Okay.
He worked in a kind of home where there were children, where thought he could get children. In all these places, he made his headquarters the basement or the cellar. And he had a habit of wearing a painter's overall over his nude body, which gave him 2 advantages. First of all, he's nude in the moment. And secondly, he would be seen by his victims only in his painter clothes. And if they later met him on the streets or in his other clothes, they wouldn't recognize him.
Oh.
Okay. Forethought. There's forethought into this.
So is that like they saw him in his painter's clothes, they wouldn't know who he is? Kind of like how Superman takes off his glasses to not be Clark Kent.
Did you just compare Albert Fish to Superman?
Yeah, no, I'm the concept. Because I think we all know
Oh my God, here we
when
go.
Clark Kent takes off his glasses, he becomes Superman. When he puts his glasses on, he becomes a reporter. So
Wow.
when he's in his regular clothes, he's Albert Fish. When he wears his overalls, he's a creep.
Wow. Okay.
What? It's legit.
I'm just going to keep talking.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well, you can ignore that one.
Okay. All
Okay.
right. Also want to talk a little bit about how how he talked about Grace. So this irritated the heck out of me, right? Because in the
Okay.
story from last season or last episode, we talked about how his main thing was he was going to take Edward
Mm-hmm.
and overpower him in some way, shape, or form. He thought he can overpower a strapping 18-year-old boy
Okay.
and his friend who was just as big as the 18-year-old. So
Yep.
he was going to take over these two guys
Okay.
and cut their penises off. That was the plan. And then let them just bleed to death.
All right.
Then little Grace walks in. He turns and looks at her and decides right then it's going to be her and he's going to eat her. Okay?
Okay.
So that was the original.
Okay.
Then he turned around to say he thought Grace was a boy. Okay?
Okay.
So that was another one.
Okay.
Then he went into his religious mania. Now, again, Fish is trying to paint this image of him being completely insane.
Yeah.
Because he wants the insanity.
Yeah.
He did not want to die by electric chair. As much as he wanted to pull it out and say it was going to be the thrill of my life, he really didn't want that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he was trying to put out there that he was going to be insane.
Yeah, I get your.
And he was going to do religious mania as another reason. So first he was saying that he thought Grace was a boy and used the decapitation that he did on her as a symbolic form of castration.
Okay.
So, I thought you were a boy. Then I realized you're a girl. I'm going to take your head instead of your penis. That was another thought there.
Okay.
Okay. Then he went on to say that he believed that if she wasn't meant to die, then God would have sent an angel to stop the sacrifice because he was sacrificing her apparently.
Yeah.
Just like he did for the story of Abraham in the Bible.
Right.
Where Abraham was going to take his son and sacrifice him to prove his loyalty. And he sent an angel and the angel's like, no, don't do it. We were just testing you type thing.
Okay.
So he was saying, well, if God really didn't want her to die, then he would have sent an angel to stop what I was doing.
Okay.
So that was another thought that he came up with. Then he felt that eating Grace was a form of communion. Drinking her blood, eating her body.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Because he was able, even though he didn't talk about the cannibalism to any of the detectives.
Okay.
And like I said in last episode, they didn't even ask.
Okay.
Like they just bypassed that whole thing and didn't even bring up the idea that he might have ate her. Even though he confessed it in the letter, they were like, yeah, we're not even going to talk about that. He did admit to this doctor that he ate her.
Okay.
Made stew from her body. Took him 9 days.
Okay.
But he also said, because remember how he said he caught her blood in a bucket and then like dumped it out the window.
Okay.
He then told the doctor that he actually tried to drink her blood and was only able to get a couple gulps in before he felt real sick.
Okay.
So, okay. This man says a lot. I struggle to know or struggle to really believe any of the crap he says because he was also this mastermind of obscene letters that he would send for years.
Yeah, but
was he really honestly telling the truth or was he just trying to get like a huge rise? We don't actually know if he did any of this to her because unfortunately by the time they found the body, they were able to say that yes, she was dismembered. We can tell that she was cut, but there's no way to tell if he took pieces of her body.
Okay.
Decomposition was so gone by then. It was 6
Right.
years. So it was just skeleton that they found.
Okay.
Do you think he did all that?
I think it's possible because he wasn't very stable.
Right.
I think it's also conceivable he didn't. He says it for attention.
Right.
So I think that could go many, or they can go for both sides.
Yeah.
I think only Albert knows.
And Grace.
Well,
At least her spirit.
right. But I think Albert Fish would have been the only one that would speak to it, and he knows the truth.
Mm-hmm.
But his actions basically put doubt on that.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, he liked the shock and awe, so
he did.
So maybe that's what it was. And he was messed up in the head too, in a lot of ways, that it's conceivable he could do stuff like that.
Ew.
Just,
yeah. So he also said at another point that taking Grace was a command from God, who told him to take a virgin and sacrifice her before becoming a harlot.
Okay.
Yes. So
he could have believed that.
He might have.
Yeah, he could have believed all
but
of
he's
that.
Gone through so many different stories by now. First it was, I decided I wanted her and not Edward. And then it was, I thought she was a boy. Then it was, well, an angel would have came to stop me if God didn't want this to happen. Then it was, well, it was an actual command from God. Dude.
I mean, some of it is may have happened and some might not have. He's justifying what he did.
And unfortunately, not unfortunately, fortunately, he was having those night terrors where he was screaming Grace in the middle of the night in his nightmares, according to...
Sorry, it's Friday night.
Do you need another drink?
Yeah, well, that's probably the problem.
He was screaming to Grace as if, like, I think she was haunting him.
She could have been.
And good.
It's very conceivable.
Good on her. Keep haunting the fuck out of him. I hope you're haunting him in hell. Yeah, like, for real.
Very, very conceivable.
What bothers me a lot is that he went on to say how sorry and how regretful he was of killing Grace. And it said even a half hour after he did this, he immediately regretted what he did and would have given his own life to bring her back.
Okay.
And here's why I say, fuck all the way off.
I was going to say, he wrote all these letters and he flaunted it and caused harm to the parents.
Was he flaunting or admitting? Did it get to him to a point where he finally confessed to it?
I don't know, because I think he liked attention too, and he obviously was not right in the head. Right. So
and the author puts in the book here that at one point Albert was thinking he wanted to put Mrs. Budd's mind at ease and finally tell her what really happened to her daughter, so she no longer has to.
Who would think that?
Right.
That would put somebody at ease.
Right. Like, he was doing her this big favor by finally writing a confession letter and sent it to her saying, I killed her and ate her. There, now you know what happened. Now you can go to sleep at night. Like, dude, you did no favors.
Could you go to sleep at night after reading that?
Right. Dude, you did no favors.
How do you think that's a favor?
No, fuck all the way off. Again, I'm going to keep on saying that. And I'm sorry, but I hate it when somebody says, if I regret doing that, if I could take it back, I would. Fuck off. Then don't do it. Don't do it.
Okay.
If you're gonna say I regretted killing her, I would give her my life if I could. No, too late. Too late. You don't get to be sorry now. You killed her already. You killed a child of 10 years old.
Right.
I can give two damns if you regret it now. The fact is you did it.
Right.
She's now not here because of you.
Okay.
So fuck off with the whole I'm so sorry I did that. I could give her my life if I could. Fuck off. Too late. That means nothing.
Okay. But does he mean it when he says that?
I don't care. Then you shouldn't have killed her. You could have not killed her. That was what really could have happened. You could have chosen not to kill her.
True.
You had time. You took her from her house. You walked her to a train. You sat for 45 minutes on the train with her, watching her get excited about looking at the countryside. You then got off the train, walked with her to the house. You watched her pick wildflowers. At any point in time, you could have stopped and not killed her, but you did. And then half hour later, he's saying, well, now I regret it. Fuck off. Too late. Fuck off. Okay. Am I mean for that? I might be.
No.
It's just me saying I really don't care how much you regret something. If you regret it, then you shouldn't have done it. Shouldn't have done it. Anyway. Okay. So moving on. Albert Jr. talked about some of the stuff that he saw his dad doing in the last few years, which was witnessed his father naked in the bedroom, jumping up and down in front of a window and beating himself with a board.
Okay.
He also witnessed his father naked in front of a window, painting it with a dry paintbrush.
Okay.
Just again, stuff that Albert Jr. kind of put on the stand when he talked about odd behaviors, including this werewolf thing.
Yeah.
But I honestly wonder if this was Albert Jr. wanting his dad to get the insanity plea as well.
Possible.
And really putting forward, like, my dad did this crazy stuff.
It's very possible. Yes.
Could be. So Dr. Wortham could not say that he was criminally insane, but as a whole was an insane person.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about the difference between the two insanities. So just putting that out there that Dr. Wortham really felt that this was an insane man, but couldn't say that he was criminally insane where he wasn't competent to stand trial.
Right. Okay.
So prosecution listened to all of this. Listen to the religious mania. Listen to Dr. Wortham's information. Listen to the crazy stuff that he was doing, like sticking pins up him and
yeah. Okay. Well, let's not. I don't need to talk about that part. Yeah.
Yeah. So he brought all that up, and prosecution, in short, said, "This is all bullshit. This is premeditated murder, and premeditated because of the fact that he looked for a location. He found Wisteria Cottage. That was on his mind. He went and got a bucket to carry the cheese and strawberries. He went and bought the tools. He had a plan, and maybe the plan wasn't for Grace, but it was a plan to kill somebody.
Yeah.
He had it all planned out, and then took Grace, probably because she was easier than two 18-year-old heavy dudes that can probably kick his ass.
Probably.
Sorry, but prosecution's like, no, he wanted to kill her from the moment he saw her. Screw all of your religious BS. God didn't tell him nothing. He is sane. He knew what he was doing at the time that he did it. He knew it was wrong, because then he wouldn't say he immediately regretted it. Therefore, he knew it was wrong at the time he did it. So, not insane. He should get murder.
Well, that doesn't mean he regretted it. He just may have said he regretted it, because that's the thing you need to say to get
sympathy. No, it
lighter
wasn't
sentence.
Yeah, which wasn't going to happen, dude.
Right.
You killed a 10-year-old child.
Just saying. I mean.
So now, not only was Fish, believe it or not, under scrutiny, but so was Bellevue Hospital. Because how many times has he been to Bellevue and they would release him saying he's sane? After all of the testing that they conducted and even admitted multiple times that, yeah, dude's weird.
Dude is weird.
Dude is weird.
Dude is weird.
But as they come back, and even me working in the mental health field for as long as I have, psychiatrists can only do so much.
Yeah.
And if you can beat the tests, we're not going to say that Albert was the first one to ever lie on a test and know enough about what they're going to ask and how you should answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
For you and me, how often do we get hearing tests in the Marines and Army?
Right.
And did they ever change the pattern?
Right.
No.
And if you think about it, Ed Kemper,
Yeah,
beat all these tests. He had like a high ass IQ, was a very smart man, beat these tests and had a body in his trunk while talking to the cops and just hanging out with them.
Yeah.
Like, yes, there's a way that you can give a psychiatrist answers that they probably want to hear.
Yeah, there's got to be.
So you can just be released. And the thing is he was admitting, Albert always admitted to the crazy stuff that he did to himself.
Yeah.
That is not a crime.
No.
If you are being sexually gratified by your own beating,
it's not technically a crime.
Cool. I guess go home and stick more pins up you, I suppose. But
okay, that's a bad example again.
Do these pins bother you, dear?
Oh man.
He liked to be whipped. Okay, that's also not a crime.
And I hang out with you, and you keep talking about these pins. I'm starting to get scared.
You probably should be.
Okay, I'm starting to get a little afraid to be around you.
Uh-oh. It took you a year to be afraid of me? That was a long time.
Yeah, you are starting to think you are crazy.
Starting?
Yeah.
Damn, I did a good job hiding it too then. All right.
What? Excuse me?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, bestie.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. How are you doing today?
Preparing to continue talking about this.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so closing arguments would start. So Albert specifically wanted the jury to know a passage from Jeremiah chapter 19 verse 9.
Okay.
Now Dempsey didn't read this verse to the jury. However, we're going to read this verse really quickly. Okay?
Okay. Do you need a Bible?
Because it's in the book.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I know you probably have like a million Bibles.
Not in here. This is our paranormal area, so I don't think we have one in here.
Okay. Here we go. The passage involving the Lord's threats of punishment against the sinning kingdom of Judah reads, "And I will cause them to eat the flesh of their sons and the flesh of their daughters, and they shall eat every one the flesh of his friend and siege the straightness wherewithin the enemies, and they will seek their lives, shall straighten them."
I'm going to stand up and shut the door because if you hear that noise in the background,
oh, cleaners are here.
Cleaners are here. They're vacuuming, so we're going to shut the door.
So here's my thing with that. You read one verse from a chapter without reading, and whoever has read the Bible before, like we've done Bible studies, I grew up Lutheran. I can be the first one to say that you can't just read a verse and get a whole meaning out of it. There's context, and it could be talking about something in a whole story. So yes, that one verse sounds like God is telling us to eat each other. No, he's not. Read the story. Read all of it. You can't just take a verse.
I mean, at one point, slavery was accepted.
And it's in the Bible.
And it progressed to where you're not a slave.
Mm-hmm. So Albert did want everybody to hear that verse because that's what he like really went on.
Okay.
Okay. Also discussing lost my page. Look, I shut the book and then I lose my page.
It's okay.
Okay, so this part bothered me as well. So as part of Dempsey's closing argument, not only did he talk about how Fish felt about this Bible passage and felt like he was being told to eat flesh of other humans.
Mm-hmm.
He was also blaming Bellevue Hospital for releasing him as many times as they did. Again, Bellevue saying like, hey, like we cannot predict somebody's going to go and murder another person. It's not what we saw in the testing. It's not what we were able to see in his mannerisms and behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
You can't predict somebody's going to go kill another person.
Right.
So that was kind of Bellevue retorting back like, there's only so much a hospital can do.
Okay.
This bugged me. All right. So Dempsey also ended with his closing arguments of, but I honestly do believe, gentlemen, that one of the reasons why Mr. and Mrs. Budd feel so badly is because they permitted the little child whom God had given them for protection and care during her infancy and childhood, they permitted that little girl to be taken off by this defendant.
Okay.
This is not a case, gentlemen, where the man takes a little girl off the street or by force. This is a case where a man took a child with the consent and permission of her parents. Now, whether they appreciate it or not, the fiend that this man was, after all, a total stranger to them. And I say to you advisedly that there's no feeling of protection in the animal sphere or the human sphere, no feeling of protection such as a mother gives to her child. I submit that some of the responsibility must go to the family for permitting that little girl to go with an absolute stranger on that particular Sunday.
Okay.
Dempsey, shut the fuck up. Fuck off. Did you really just blame the parents for this man killing their child? That's like victim shaming at like its strongest point.
Yeah.
Because not only did he blame them, but don't you think that family from that day on has lived with that day in and out? That they trusted this man that came to the home that was supposed to be their son's employer, and that happened to their daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't that make you sick a little bit?
A little, yeah.
Wait a minute.
That's not.
I feel like you're agreeing with something here, or not agreeing.
No, you're blaming the victim's family. That's not like, how were they supposed to know that he was going to do that?
It's like blaming the hospital. How are they supposed to know that he was going to go kill somebody when he had no homicidal indication whatsoever? He was just weird.
Yeah.
He had other mental illnesses. Yes, absolutely. But he wasn't criminal.
No.
So shut the hell up, Dempsey. How dare you blame the family? How dare you blame the family?
Now, devil's advocate here, he is the defense attorney, and it is his job to defend Albert Fish. So he's doing his job, but that is kind of messed up to blame the family.
It was a dick move.
Yeah. And that's the route he decided to take. Now, it's probably not the most effective route. Granted.
Right.
I mean, it's probably not the most above board route to pick, but that's the way he went.
Well, we're going to read, okay? We're going to read the last passage of the closing argument, which actually was pretty good. Okay. I ask you to bear with me for a moment. Tell me now, each man answering in his own heart, now that you've heard all the evidence for the people and all the evidence for the defense, tell me now, do you believe before God that Albert Fish was sane on June 3rd, 1928? Do you believe on the day he knew the distinction between right and wrong? Unless you believe that, gentlemen, if you later find him guilty, it will be on mere breath, not upon evidence. Recall the answer in your heart when you go to the jury room. Record the answer man for man when you cast those ballots, life or death.
Yeah.
The voice of one man, gentlemen, saves Albert Fish's life. It takes 12 ballots of guilty to send him to death. And before you make that answer, I have but one more request to make of you. And having made it under these circumstances, you cannot, gentlemen, you will not forget it. In the course of human nature, 10 of you 12 men will die in full possession of your reason and memory. When that hour comes and blood begins to congeal and your breath to fail, when death snaps one by one of the strings of life, when you look back at the past and forward judgment, remember Albert Fish, that when he was helpless and defenseless and pleaded with you for his life, that you said, let him live or let him die. And if you said, let him die, may he who breathed into your nostrils a breath of life judge you more merciful than you judge this man.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. More merciful than you judge this maniac. Sorry, not man, maniac. He said maniac.
Okay.
Okay. Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
I thought he had a really good ending to that statement.
Right. He was pointing out the fact that he wasn't right and not normal.
Correct.
So he was acknowledging that.
Yep. So during the closing argument, Gallagher from the prosecution attacked the idea that Albert was a defenseless old man, and put multiple times that he was defenseless, as he also put, gentlemen, I want you to remember the defenseless little innocent Grace Budd, as she kicked and screamed in the springtime of her life and said she would tell her mama. So there's two things to weigh here. You have this man who was insane in many ways.
Right.
And definitely not in the right mindset of a human.
No.
And then you have this innocent little girl kicking and screaming, being choked to death.
Right.
That was a lot for the jury to weigh. I'm going to say that.
It is.
I would not want to be on that jury.
No.
So I would also want to say, and I'm going to post the picture of this because I thought it was really interesting. After the prosecution and defense did their closing arguments, Gertrude, Albert's daughter, approached the Budd family and apologized for their loss of their daughter at the hands of her father.
Okay.
And they took a picture of that here. Do I just click on it? You do it.
Okay. That's right there.
Okay. So in the picture, you'll see Gertrude shaking hands with Mr. Edward Budd, who was actually the intended target.
Yeah.
And then behind her is standing Albert Jr.
Okay.
So she's finally shaking hands and at least kind of doing the human thing and, apologizing for their loss due to what her father did.
Okay.
So
yeah.
I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah.
I'm glad that somebody made some sort of reach out to the family, because it takes a lot of guts to do that. In all cases, Edward could have looked at her and said, you can go fuck off with your dad. And he would have every right to do that. But there was definitely that risk involved, and she took it upon herself to take on that risk and
that was
face some face to face.
So it was a good.
He raised good kids.
Right.
He was like a monster, but he raised these really good kids.
He was a monster out of the home.
Right.
But in the home, he had values.
Kinda. Because if you remember, he
Yeah.
did some crazy games with his kids too.
Right. But
For sexual gratification, which at the time they didn't know because they were
No.
kids.
But he also did raise upstanding kids.
Yes. And it was
So-
actually not reported that any of his 6 kids did anything wrong. They went on to live normal lives. So
is being a criminal or a creep hereditary then? I don't think so. It's the examples you get.
right. I think, well, we'll get into what I think in a minute. All right. So anyway, the jury was released at 6 p.m. They returned a verdict by 8:27 p.m. The jury found Albert Fish guilty of first-degree murder.
Okay.
March
Shocker.
24th, right? March 24th, after the trial, Albert confessed to another killing. This time, he actually confessed to the Gaffney child, which we all knew he did.
Yeah.
But he kept saying he didn't do it. And now the trial's over. He's about to be sentenced. He hasn't had a sentence hearing yet, but now he's kind of laying it out there. So March 24th, Albert wrote something new, and I will read this. Trigger warning, this is really heavy. So if you want to skip past this part, you wouldn't hurt my feelings any. I mean, we are talking about a 3-year-old child here. So kind of a issue. All right. So the old man had already written out details of the killing in a letter to James Dempsey. Okay. The Gaffney crime had surpassed even the Bud outrage. There is a public dumping ground in Riker Avenue, Astoria, the letter began. All kinds of junk have been thrown there for years. I will admit the motorman who positively identified me as getting off the car with a small boy was correct. I can tell you at the time I was looking for a suitable place to do the job. Not satisfied there, I brought him to Riker Avenue dumps. There is a house that stands alone, not far from where I took him. A few years ago, I painted this house for a man who owns it. He's in the auto wrecking business. I forget his name, but my son Henry can tell you because he bought a car from him. This man's father lives in the house. Jean, John, and Henry helped me paint the house. There was at the time a number of old autos along the road. I took the Gaffney boy there, stripped him naked, tied his hands and feet, and gagged him with a piece of dirty rag I picked out of the dump. I then burned his clothes, threw his shoes in the dump. I then walked back and took the trolley to 59th Street at 2 a.m. and walked from there home. Next day, about 2 p.m., I took tools, a good heavy cat o' nine tails, homemade, short handle, cut one of my belts in half, slit these halves in 6 strips about 8 inches long. I whipped his bare behind till the blood ran from his legs. I cut off his ears, nose, slit his mouth from ear to ear. I gouged out his eyes. He was dead then. I stuck the knife in his belly and held my mouth to the body and drank his blood. I picked up 4 old potato sacks, gathered in a pile of stones. I then cut him up. I had a grip with me. I put his nose and ears and a few slices of his belly in grip. Then I cut him through the middle of his body, just below the belly button, then through his legs about 2 inches below his behind. I put this in my grip with a lot of paper. I cut off the head, feet, arms, hands, and the legs below the knee. I put in sacks weighed with stones, tied the ends, and threw them into the pools of slimy water you will see all along the road going to North Beach. Water is 3 to 4 feet deep. They sank at once. I came home with my meat. I had the front of his body I liked the best. His monkey and Pee-wee's was nice and little fat behind the roast of the oven to eat. I made stew of his ears, nose, pieces of his face and belly. I put onions, carrots, turnips, celery, salt, and pepper. It was good. I then split the cheeks of his behind open, cut off his peewee and his monkeys, and washed them first. I put strips of bacon on each cheek of his behind and put it in the oven. I then picked 4 onions, and when the meat had roasted about a quarter of an hour, I put a pint of water over it for gravy and put in the onions. And dude has a recipe.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, he wrote a recipe. Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on. At frequent intervals, I basted his behind with a wooden spoon so the meat would be nice and juicy. In about 2 hours, it was nice and brown, cooked through. I never ate any roast turkey that tasted half as good as his sweet little fat behind did. I ate every bit of his meat for about 4 days. The little monkey was sweet as a nut, and his peewees I could not chew. Threw them in the toilet. Yeah. So that was 8 years after Billy disappeared. Miss Gaffney had always said, I know in my heart and soul that Billy will come back to me. I never felt he is dead. I cannot get it in my head what woman would take Billy away. He was nice looking and well liked. So, as for the confession, though, Miss Gaffney declared that she would not believe it until she heard the details from the own man's lips. And Mr. Gaffney said that he would not believe Albert Fish unless Albert was able to state what Billy was wearing on the day that he took him. So we have Mr. and Mrs. Gaffney who are just, we don't believe you. We do not believe that this is how our son died.
Okay.
And you know what? I'm okay with that.
Oh.
That must have been heartbreaking. And maybe easier for them to live their lives just saying, you know what? Nope, that didn't happen to my son.
Yep.
So on March 24th, or I'm sorry, Albert was sentenced to die by electric chair on March 25th by Justice Close.
Okay.
When he was sentenced, Albert replied to the judge, "Thank you, judge," and waved.
Oh.
So still putting on an act like he was okay with dying, but we know that he probably was not.
Well, he's putting on a good act.
On the same day of his sentencing, he did actually confess finally to Francis McDonald.
Okay.
He stated that he murdered 8-year-old Francis, luring him into the woods and strangling him with his own suspenders until he bled from the neck. He was intending to dismember him as well, but heard people in the area and fled. So that was finally out there. Media reported that Albert was the most vicious child slayer in criminal history. And here's to be honest, we'll never know how many Albert actually killed. But he was recorded to tell the police that he had at least one in every state throughout the Midwest. And if you think about it, so there was another story that I read from this book that I'm just going to freelance and talk about really quick. There was a man or kid, 16-year-old kid, immigrant, not too long off the ship actually, was sitting in Central Park, and Albert happened to come upon him and say, "Hey, I have a job for you if you're interested or if you're looking for a job." And it would be painting houses. And the guy's like, they were desperate for money. Like the family just got here off the boat. None of them were working. He really wanted to work. So he was like, yeah, absolutely. And he was like, all right, well, we just have to take the ferry over to Staten Island. That's where the crew is. I'll go introduce you to the crew.
Right.
So he took him to Staten Island, took him to a shack that wasn't far from where McDonald's family was.
Okay.
Took him to the shack. And this kid was like, okay, what are we doing here? And Albert's like, hey, just wait out here for a second. I have to run inside and get my tools, and then we'll be on our way. Okay. I will say that angels come in all shapes and forms. And I say that because as a 16-year-old was standing out there, he said a man that he didn't see when he got there,
Okay.
or around the area. It was a black man, came
Mhm.
out of nowhere, walked up to him and say, "Hey kid, you better run and get out of here. Many kids have gone in there and never come out."
Wow.
There was no questions asked. The 16-year-old was like, "Deuces,"
Yeah.
and ran. He had to make his own way back home because now he has to get on this ferry, but eventually he was able to get home. He did report this to his family, his mom and dad. They did report it to the police. So there is a police report that confirms the story.
Okay.
But who was this man? It's amazing because who was this man that came out of nowhere and was like, "You better get out of here"?
Yeah.
And then what kids? Like many kids come here and they don't come out.
Mhm.
Who is going in there? Like, how many kids did this man take? And we'll never know that.
No.
That's insane. Like, how many missing persons reports are
How
out there
common?
that are probably connected to this man?
How common was that at that time?
Well, kidnapping was very common.
Yeah.
But we're looking at there's got to be hundreds of kids out there that were either molested, tortured, or killed by this man.
Right. There's. I mean.
And we'll never know.
And at that time, kidnapping was a common thing, so that was how he got away with it.
It's insane. And he got away with it also because in the end, he was just this old man that
Yeah.
nobody would ever suspect
That too.
eventually. I mean, he was a
But
creepy looking old man.
the times, kidnapping was a common thing, and
Yep. So an angel came from nowhere and saved this boy's life.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. So Miss Gaffney actually went to Sing Sing prison where Albert was being held, and she met with Albert.
Mhm.
And upon Albert getting to the room, he just shut down. He stated he absolutely would refuse to speak with her and stayed in the room, either hiding his face, covering it with newspaper, or constantly weeping.
Okay.
So for 2 hours, Gaffney had attempted to ask him questions, and Albert would never respond to her.
Okay.
So fuck you, dude. Thanks for being a complete ass and uncooperative, even though you just confessed to killing her kid and wrote that disgusting story about what you did. She shows up and now you want to play that game. Fuck you, dude. And after that 2 hours, she finally gave up, walked out, and said she didn't believe that Albert killed her son. He wouldn't say anything to her.
Right.
And again, I think it's less of she probably believed to some level, but wasn't going to admit that.
Mm-hmm.
I think she just wanted to live the rest of her life that her son is going to come home.
Okay.
And just didn't want to believe the horror that her son might have had to go through. Because what mother wants to know that?
Right.
That would have killed her, I think.
Possibly. Yeah.
And it's possible that the only thing that kept her living was the fact that she just believed her son was okay somewhere.
Right.
So Dempsey did attempt multiple appeals. Oh, and I wanted to show this one too. It's just something that Albert did. There he is, hiding his face. That was common for him.
Okay.
He did that in multiple media reports. He would do that to reporters. He did that a lot in court. And apparently right in front of Miss Gaffney, just covered his face. Just did not want to be seen. I just hit remove.
Yep.
Okay. So, so Dempsey attempted multiple appeals. Unfortunately, the courts not unfortunately, anyway. Fortunately, the courts stayed the execution. He did state that no single case history report, either legal or medical annuals, contain records of one individual who possessed all of these sexual abnormalities.
Yeah.
And there's so many of them, I won't read all of them, but just to give you a glimpse at what he all had: sadism, flagellation, castration, self-castration, voyeur acts, pickery acts, pedophilia, homosexuality, which really isn't. Today, it's not mental
Then it would have
defect.
been.
Back then, it was, but today, that's not a mental defect or disease. Oral stimulation of the anus, eating feces. That was a thing for him. Sexual preoccupation with urine, fetishism, cannibalism. I mean, that's just a few things that I picked out of this longer list. In the end, he had like 17 different sexual abnormalities, which again, there wasn't a single case history ever in this time to have one person have that much going on.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So that was another reason why they're like, he's got to be declared insane. Like, how are you going to put him to death? However, court stayed it. So,
I mean, the things he did to himself doesn't make him insane, I wouldn't think.
no. Maybe?
Just, yeah. Don't even know.
I don't know. So on January 16th of 1936, Albert was taken to the dance hall, which was like their way of saying the death chamber.
Yep.
And he was served his last meal. His lunch was a T-bone steak and dinner was roasted chicken. Both had their bones removed this time, though.
Okay.
They weren't playing that game. So no bones were allowed
Okay.
in his food. Albert was strapped to the chair at 11:06 p.m. and was pronounced dead by 11:09.
Okay.
Shortly after midnight, a reporter came to the home of the Budds, and when Miss Budd opened the door, he told her that Albert was dead. He had his paper and pad ready and was ready to take a statement if she had anything to say after that. Miss Budd simply closed the door.
Okay.
And that's really the end of the story.
Okay.
He is dead. Miss Budd had absolutely nothing to say. I know after the trial they were happy to hear the findings that he was guilty. But in the end, that doesn't bring their daughter back.
No.
And what can you say?
There's not much to say.
So just to show a few pictures here, I wanted to add the house. That was the house that he killed Grace Budd in.
Okay.
Cottage, the Wisteria Cottage. It is remodeled now. The house is still standing, and it's absolutely gorgeous, by the way. Very beautiful.
Somewhere you'd want to go?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. I did want to add this as well. These three boys on that side of the paper is his three of his sons, with Alfred Jr. right in the middle between them. And then those are two of his daughters, Anne and Gertrude.
Okay.
Okay. And then we are going to bring this one up. So that was Mr. Albert Fish. And that was Albert Fish being strapped to the chair.
Okay.
Okay. I'm not sure what to make of the face. He looks sad, almost.
I don't know.
I can't tell.
I don't think he does. I think he looks more
Accepting?
Yeah, or unremorseful of it. Just
Now, there was a ton of talk about this execution going wrong because of the pins. Now remember, he stuck pins in his body. They did actually do an x-ray to see if this guy was just blowing smoke up everybody's butt, but he really wasn't. The radiologist did find 29 pins inserted into his body, and it was absolutely ruled out that he could have swallowed any of them because of the placement of them. They could not surgically remove the pins because they were so far embedded in his body that some of them were already corroding for how long they've been there.
Okay.
So they counted 29 pins in his body.
Yeah. Okay.
And again, it was placed in that area between the scrotum and the anus. So that like sensitive piece.
Thanks
Pin
for that.
cushion.
Thanks for that.
You're welcome. I was hoping that I could remind you at some point of where those pins were.
I think you like torturing me.
A little bit. So there was talk about how these pins would affect the electric chair, and that like part of him would like either explode or, catch a fire or something like that. That was all myth. The execution went on as it typically would. There was nothing that these pins did to the execution.
Okay.
And for that famous x-ray to see the pins in his body, there it is. I can't see 29, but I'm not a radiologist and I'm not looking at the actual film.
And that is not
right.
the best picture. It's just a copy.
But I mean, you can see these little black lines in the pelvic area. That's where he embedded all of those pins into his body. So they were absolutely there. He was not blowing smoke up anybody's butt. He did that to himself.
Alrighty then.
All right.
Okay.
So we're going to add Mr. Fish to the stage here. And that is him. And yeah.
Okay. Wow. That is unique.
Yeah. So really quickly, I just wanted to go through the legal insanity versus mental illness. So legal insanity is the legal concept and not a clinical one. A person can be mentally ill without being legally insane and vice versa. Okay. So if a defendant is found not guilty by reason of insanity, it means that they are not deemed to have the necessary mental state to be held responsible for a crime at the time it was committed. Criminally insane in the legal context refers to a mental state at the time that the crime makes the defendant unable to understand the nature and quality of their actions or unable to distinguish right from wrong. This is distinctly from being mentally ill, which is a clinical diagnosis. It's a legal determination based on the defendant's mental state at the time of the offense. In order to prove legal insanity at time, to have the legally insane defense, you must be able to prove one, mental disease or defect. The individual must have recognized mental illness or defect at the time of the crime. Yes. So he did have mental illness or defect at the time of the crime. So they were able to prove that. Number two, lack of understanding. They must have been able to understand the nature and quality of their actions. This means that they must have been unable to understand the nature and quality of their actions, meaning they did not grasp the fact that the situation or the significance of what they were doing. That cannot be proven. There was no way they were going to be able to prove that. Yes, he was completely insane in my viewpoint. I mean, there's obviously some insanity going on there.
Right.
But there's no way that you can prove that he wasn't able to understand the nature and quality of his action. He knew what he was doing. He knew he was killing her. He knew he was killing her because he was sacrificing her, which is to kill somebody, and then believe that that was okay, even though he had like 4 different stories.
Right, he did.
And then inability to distinguish right from wrong is the third thing that you would need to prove. The person must have been unable to differentiate between right and wrong in the context of their actions. They didn't understand what they were doing was morally or legally wrong. I'm going to go ahead and say there's no way to prove that either. He knew what he was doing wrong because he had even gone out on a limb to say that he got caught because his son, Edward, sent him a check that he would send every month, $25 check. And had his son not sent him that check, he would have never gotten caught. The fact that he even wrote that, he knew that he was running this whole time.
Right.
And then blamed his son later and said, had you not gotten that job and had you not sent me a check like you did every month, I wouldn't have gotten caught.
Okay.
And then he went on to tell reporters and the detective, it's because of me that you even were able to find Grace. It's because I was able to show you where she was.
Hmm.
So, like, do you get a clap for that? Like, should we pat you on the shoulder? Like, I don't even know what the fuck he meant by that. But anyway, like, did he want like a hug? Like,
Maybe
fuck
you want a
him.
cookie.
I guess, he can fuck off. Anyway, so any person who is suffering from any kind of mental illness is called medically insanity. However, legal insanity means persons suffering from mental illness should also have a loss of reasoning power.
Hmm.
So insanity is usually reserved for describing severe conditions involving psychotic-like breaks with reality, while mental illness can include both severe and milder forms of mental problems. So I could believe that he would be clinically insane. That would make more sense to me because he did have breaks from reality.
Right.
He thought he was God at one point and stood naked on a hill with his arms spread out in front of Albert Jr. and his friends saying, "I am God." Okay, he's done stuff like that. He rolled himself up into a carpet and stayed there for the entire night, saying that John the Baptist told him to do that. So, yes, I do think he had breaks from reality. I do think he had a psychosis-like type of behaviors. It would not surprise me if he was clinically insane, but legally insane, I disagree. I think he was sane. I think he knew exactly what the fuck he was doing, and he was doing it for years. So I don't think I necessarily want to say like, hey, we put a mental man to death. He had everything wrapped into one.
Yeah.
He was insane but sane. If that makes sense.
Does the ends justify the means? Like, he was a dangerous person.
Yes.
So
there's no way he could have been on the streets. He would have kept doing this.
Yeah.
Did he have to die? In my viewpoint, what he had going on is not rehabilitatable. I don't think he could have ever been rehabilitated to be able to safely join society again. I think his mind, his brain was completely broken.
Right.
I don't know if I can go out on a limb and say he was a psychotic person, possibly sociopath, but I don't think that he could have been rehabilitated.
Okay.
So, some people might have been interested in the his children. There's been no stories of any of his 6 children going on to have any mental disease or defects. Gertrude, his favorite, ended up living in Connecticut. She died October of 2004 in Connecticut at the age of 95. She did marry, and her spouse died in 2003. Which, honestly, I mean, the children and grandkids of his children, I mean, there's still descendants out there.
Yeah.
And not long removed descendants.
Okay.
Just kind of putting that out there.
Yeah.
Everett, his son Everett, he married Madeline Spies, and they lived in Connecticut. He died at the age of 85 and was buried also in Connecticut. Madeline died in 1974.
Okay.
Harold Albert Fish, I'm just reading here, died at the age of 72, buried in Pennsylvania where he moved to. He was also married, and she died in 1986.
Okay.
Evelyn stayed in Connecticut and also went to Massachusetts. It's a word I have never been able to say, so if I have to say it, I say it very slowly. She died at the age of 76, and she was buried also in Massachusetts. Okay. And her husband died in 1948. They did have a child.
Okay.
Ruth Alice died September 2011. She was actually in England.
Okay.
However, she did die in Connecticut at the age of 94. She was buried in British colonial America.
Mm-hmm.
She married Floyd Williams. He also died in 1988. They had 3 children. William Edwin, he had died on July 16, 2009 at the age of 90. He's in Manchester, Connecticut. No history on him having a wife or children.
Okay.
Arthur Jr. I should say Albert Jr. He had died young. He died at the age of 44. So he was also married to a Joyce Fish who died in 2019.
Okay.
So I kind of want to look up what he died from because he died at a young age. So, but everybody else lived until elderly ages.
Okay.
And were not at all known for any crime or anything that they have done.
Okay.
So, everybody, this was the story of Mr. Albert Fish.
Yes.
A 3-part series.
Couple of long ones. So if you made it all the way to the end, give yourself a pat on the back.
We are not the only ones that have done a podcast on Albert Fish, and the other podcasts on Albert Fish were long series as well. There's just so much that went into his life. So much. And I will say that he was obviously a product of multiple things, of beyond a perfect storm. I mean, he had issues with family having mental illness and defects, 2 dying in the mental institutions.
Yep.
He had elderly father. I mean, not to say that if you're older and you have kids that something's going to be wrong with you, but if you're looking at the age of his dad, he was in his 70s when Albert was born.
Right.
Then died shortly thereafter. Mom had to abandon him for a little bit to get back on her feet after being widowed. And then he lived in an orphanage, which is documented and legally documented to have multiple cases of abuse. And they have been taken to court and been proven that they have done these things.
Right.
And then to me, it's genetic, environmental, everything all at once in his brain. And I don't think there was ever a way to fix that.
Probably not.
And he likely killed many, many more
than we talked about.
Yeah.
So.
And we'll never know if anything that he says he did was actually true. He loved writing stories.
Right.
So, did he eat the kids?
I don't know.
We don't know.
But, well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for sitting through our Creeps and Cocktails. We had a good time drinking our Rickies.
Yep. And we will be starting out with
you're doing the next one. I'm taking a break.
With tarot. So we're going to talk about the origin of tarot, meaning of some of the bigger cards. And we'll see where it leads us.
Yep. All right. So. Well, thank you, everybody. I really enjoyed getting my doctorate in Albert Fish. Do read, if you ever want to know more and get more into it, do read Deranged. Great book. Absolutely wonderful. So much information in here. And to be honest, the author was able to sit with Mr. Dempsey himself, the attorney.
Yep.
At the age of 88, he was able to open his case files and talk to the author about fish and get some really good insights. So read the book. It's quite detailed. You'll get so much more information. I couldn't cover all of it in just 3 sessions. And I'm going to take a break from this heavy subject.
Yes.
Okay. So he's going to enjoy the tarot next.
Yes.
And I'm just going to sit back and put my feet up and just listen. I'm taking a break.
Okay.
All right.
Alrighty.
Well, good night, everybody. See you for season 3.